Hello and welcome to MLive Citizen Roundtable. We've got Michigan citizens here to ask about 3 issues that we've been following in a series of stories leading up to the election. The first one is Michigan's economy, the second one is our education system, and the third is our infrastructure. We've had stories exploring these topics, and now we've got some citizens to talk about those with our candidate for governor, former Senate Minority Leader Gretchen Whitmer. Welcome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate all of you making time to be here. I think you've got important voices, and you're asking a lot of the same questions. I know you're focused on the same things that Michiganders across our state are. I jumped in this race for governor because I love our state. I'm proud to be a Michigander. But I look around at the Michigan in which my kids are growing up, and it doesn't quite live up to the one that I think of when I talk about my pride. People used to come from around the world to Michigan because in Michigan you could get a good job that would pay you well enough, you could raise a family and retire with dignity. When you got here, you knew no matter where you lived, your kids would have a great public school education. You could confidently turn on your tap water and bathe your children, as well as give them a glass of water at the dinner table. And you could travel our roads and get to your destination. And I think on all 4 of these critical measurements, we are dangerously behind. And that's why I jumped in this race for governor. During my time in the legislature, I worked really hard to make sure that I stayed true to my values, but always worked with anyone who wanted to solve a problem. And that meant crossing the aisle on occasion. I know how to do it in order to get things done. And the most energizing and best thing I've done in the last 21 months on the campaign trail is get into all 83 counties and talk to people across our state and listen. So it keeps me focused on what people in our state want and need to see from their next governor.
Well, Gretchen, thanks so much for kicking it off. And kicking it off on the questioning side is Ken here.
Thank you. Gretchen, public education is not working in Michigan. We've continued to pour money into our school system without seeing major improvements. What would you do to reinvent the way public education is conducted to address our failing system?
People used to move to this state for opportunity, like I just mentioned, and one of the great things was that our education system, no matter where you lived, it was one of the best in the world. The Michigan schools, that means from Detroit Public Schools to Marquette Public Schools to Grand Rapids Public Schools. And right now we are in the bottom 10 in our country, and it is not the fault of the dedicated professionals who go into education. I've got kids in the public schools, and I'm a proud product of the public schools myself. There are wonderful people who dedicate their lives to education, and they need to be supportive. One of the big crises in education is that fewer and fewer people are going into that profession, that when they do, they're not able to put food on the table. I was chatting with a woman the other day who's working part-time in retail because her job as a parapro doesn't pay her well enough to take care of her 3 kids and pay down the debt she took on to go into education. But to your question, it's not just about a greater investment, although I think that's very important to stop the raids on the school aid fund. $3.5 billion has been diverted from our public schools and put into the general fund over the last 7 years. But we've got to have a real hyper focus around literacy, and that means our youngest kids, making sure they've got the wraparound supports that they need, social workers and psychologists and literacy coaches, so that our teachers who are in the classroom can get back to educating, and the kids who need the supports the most are successful and literate by the end of 3rd grade.
I have to say that being a teacher, I disagree that we're not completely working. I see kids growing every day. But our education policy, both on a state and federal level in recent years, has left many teachers feeling demoralized. Some have left education, and others have chosen different career paths. This has led to a teacher shortage. How do you plan to attract and retain teachers?
Amber, I agree with what you said right when you started talking, that it's not working. I mean, you are seeing growth, and you see growth in individual children, and that's, I know, why you went into the profession of teaching in the first place. So the profession of teaching has been one that has been demonized and demoralized. Cuts have come, in terms of health care and retirement, and I know that fewer and fewer people are going into teaching, and many are leaving to seek positions elsewhere or in totally new fields because they can't make a living. We shouldn't have a teacher in the state of Michigan who can't make enough money to put food on the table. There are teachers on the bridge card in our state. That's unconscionable. We have to make it easier to afford to go into education in the first place, so you don't leave with crippling debt that you never have a chance to pay back because you're not making enough money. My mom taught in the Lansing schools, my grandma taught in Waterford, my grandfather was a superintendent of Pontiac Public Schools. I know that the backbone of our economy and of our communities, and the thing that levels the playing field for all kids, is a great public school education. And I think our governor should listen to you and parents like me and kids like mine when making policy, instead of one family on the west side of the state who's been dictating the policy for too long in the state.
With tuition costs, as high as $28,000 or more and skyrocketing every year, which equates to roughly $2,000 a month for an individual family, for colleges and universities, whether it's within Michigan or elsewhere, and some of the degrees which offers very limited employment here and opportunities. How would you promote skilled labor careers and help integrate Michigan's workforce in the types of these different types of jobs?
We know that when Amazon chose not to keep our state in the top 20 for their HQ2 investment that they're going to be making, one of the things they cited was a gap in skills. And when I went to MSU, the state really picked up about 70% of my tuition, and it was on me and my family to come up with the other 30%. Right now, it's about the exact opposite, where so many individuals are priced out of a higher education degree because the state doesn't make that investment anymore. And we're all paying a price for that when we don't have this concentration of talent. But on top of that, we've really not helped people navigate paths into two-year degrees and into the trades. So I think it's a combination of career navigators in school, opportunity to take courses that lead to certificates, and ensuring that every high school graduate is on a path to a plan, has a plan, and they're on a path, whether it's a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree or into the trades. There is not one path for everyone, but everyone deserves a path that'll lead them to a high-wage job, and there are jobs unfilled right now.
Some states have enacted free community college, and the governor's 21st Century Education Commission has proposed it. Do you think such a plan is feasible in Michigan? And if so, how would you propose it be funded and operated?
So one of the things in my economic development plan, as I think about our economy and education and the skills gap, is we've written a plan that has the My Opportunity Scholarship, is what we call it. It is a debt-free community college degree for any graduate of high school or people that are later in life who are reinventing themselves and seeking new skills to get into a higher wage job or just have a new calling, right? Compared to the whole state budget, it's a relatively small investment that will have a massive return later when we increase skills and fill these jobs that are currently in demand that pay well, and we get more people into higher wage jobs when we build our workforce. Not long ago, I met a young man named Juan from Grand Rapids. And this is a young man who is 17, and he's really the breadwinner in his family right now. He washes dishes, he pays the bills for the family, and he wants desperately to become an electrician. We need electricians in every part of the state, but he doesn't have the $6,000 it costs to get the training at the local community college. And when you take that in and you think, this is an in-demand field where he could make a good living for him and his family, and it's just $6,000 that's standing in his way. And so it's people like Juan, who I meet every day across our state, that I've written this plan to help make those connections so we can create a better skilled workforce. We all benefit from it when we do.
Gretchen, I think you touched a bit on this with your answers with the education questions, but in case you have more to add, Michigan's middle class is disappearing as students leave school with excess debt, and wages have stagnated. What is your plan to raise wages in Michigan?
So I think we do that on a couple of different fronts. First and foremost, the skills gap, I think, is what is holding so many of us from getting into higher wage jobs. You're pursuing a new path after you'd been you're a paramedic, and now you're in school to be a nurse. Really closing that skills gap and getting people into higher wage jobs is, of course, how we raise incomes. But also, I do believe in raising the minimum wage in Michigan. And It's something that I supported. It's something that I negotiated, actually, with Republicans. I was able to cross the aisle and build in a cost of living increase. So for 4 years, every year it went up a bit. It's still not enough. I don't believe anyone should work a full-time job and still live in poverty. Our gross domestic product has increased here in Michigan. Household incomes have not. Household ownership has not either, and that's the part of the economy that we haven't fixed yet.
Hello, Gretchen. So economy question is coming. So Michigan is a state with many resources and a long manufacturing history. Past governors have tried to diversify away from the auto industry by offering incentives. What do you view the relationship between economic development incentives and the current state tax revenues? And what's your vision to attract the business to Michigan?
Well, thank you, Nicole. And you're an accountant, right?
Yes.
So yes, makes a lot of sense that Nicole's asking this question. It's a great question. You know, so when we think about the Michigan economy, we've all benefited because we were the center of mobility. You know, that's what grew the middle class, created the middle class right here in Michigan. We've benefited from it in so many ways, and so many different suppliers are a part of that. And we know that mobility is changing, and Michigan's got to stay on the cutting edge of mobility. I think it would be foolish for anyone to suggest that we not continue to try to own leadership space in mobility. And I know that's not what you were suggesting, but I think it's really important that we are doing all of the things in our economy and in our investment to maintain that edge. And as I think about it, you know, our roads are part of that. Our connectivity, broadband, the lack of real universal broadband across our state is a fundamental part of that. And so those are two things that I think and I know we can do. But here's the other thing. Michigan is home to 21% of the world's fresh water. And the whole earth, 1/5 of the fresh water that you cannot live without is in and around our borders. And because of this abundance, we have taken it for granted. We've permitted corporate threats to the water. We've seen practices that have jeopardized all of our drinking water. And we're seeing it right now with PFAS, with oil going through the Straits of Mackinac, with withdrawals, old infrastructure underneath the ground. And this is a crisis that we have in Michigan. And so as I think about where our opportunities are, we could create a blue economy in this state. We've got water, we've got research universities, we've got Michigan brains. I mean, this is an opportunity for us, and it's an urgent, dire need too. So I'd love to combine all of these and really grow a blue economy in Michigan. I think for small business, it's really important that we've got a much easier path to navigate in this state, that incentives aren't just for the big guys, that they are for people that really are on the bubble of whether or not to make an investment in their community. Where you talked a little bit about economic development. My philosophy in terms of state tax dollars is we got to get a return on it. And so when I think about economic incentives, that you better be producing jobs or making an important investment.
Do you believe Michigan can fix its roads without new revenue? If so, how? If not, how would you raise revenue?
Okay. Well, no. And if anyone tells you they can fix the roads without revenue, they better have a magic wand.
Okay.
Or be prepared to cut all of the funding that goes into, you know, education and cleaning water. And I mean, it's not real. And if anyone tells you that they can, they just either don't understand the magnitude of the problem or they're trying to deceive you. This is an investment we have to make. And the problem is right now we're all paying for bad roads. We're paying to fix our windshields or paying to fix our tires. The average driver in Michigan spends over $500 a year to fix our cars, which is the worst way to address the problem because it doesn't actually fix the problem. I think we've got to do it. We've got to do it right with the right mix and the right materials, with warranties, but also making sure that we rebuild smarter. So we lay conduit to get every community connected to high-speed broadband. So we use the opportunity to replace the pipes that are delivering our water, the old lead pipes that so many communities are having difficulty with their drinking water right now. That we work with the private sector, where if there's an opportunity to rebuild the electrical grid that we do that. We take that opportunity. It's smarter, it's less expensive, but yeah, we have to pay for it. And so my plan creates a Rebuild Michigan Infrastructure Bank. I am committed to writing a budget with $2 billion of revenue in it, to draw down that billion from the feds and to put it in this infrastructure bank so the public knows that those dollars are actually going where they're supposed to. There's understandably a lot of suspicion that when Lansing, raises, when the Capitol raises taxes, that the money doesn't go where it's supposed to go. And that's why we see local bonds pass, but when it comes to a statewide, they fail because there's just not that confidence that these guys are going to put the money where they're supposed to. So that's why it was important for me to do it that way. If I can't get the legislature to take those votes, if they're too weak to do it, I'll go straight to the people and pass a bond, because every day we don't fix this problem, it gets more expensive, it jeopardizes our safety, and it compromises our ability to lure investment into our state.
Do you maybe considering to raise tax, or from individual side, the business side, or anything maybe you will do?
When Governor Snyder put forward a gas tax, that was one of the votes that I cast. And I know that my opponent in the election's probably going to try to use that against me. But you know what? I took a tough vote to solve a problem. And I think we need a governor who's not going to pretend that they can fix a problem without a solution, a real solution. We need a governor who's willing to take the tough vote to make the plan, even if it's hard to do, and be honest with people about what it is, and to see it through and actually fix problems. That's when we are at our greatest. When we are honest, we do the work, and we solve the problem together.
The DEQ is responsible for monitoring the development, operation, and expansion of public water and sewer systems. We have witnessed the deterioration of this older infrastructure. What policies would you implement to rehab and maintain these important systems?
I talked a little bit about how we're so fortunate to have 21% of the world's fresh water. I mean, it's such a huge strength. It's so unique. And as the climate continues to change, and I do believe in climate change, I think that's important to get on the record because not everyone does. As the climate continues to change, it's going to get more and more imperative that we've got the right policies and we're protecting our water. So what I want to do is create a department that is devoted to fresh water. I would call it the Department of the Great Lakes and Freshwater. I want a drinking water ombudsman at the cabinet level, sitting there, listening, finding out what's happening in communities. This PFAS problem that we have in our state that we're just starting to figure out the magnitude of, they think that, it's about 1.5 million households shouldn't be drinking the water coming out of their taps right now because this is leaching into the groundwater. And I don't want to scare the heck out of people, but there was a report that was authored 6 years ago, and we're just finding out about it. And it scares the heck out of me. This is a crisis that we have, and the sewers and the pipes that bring the water to our house and the waste out of our homes is old, and it's not been maintained, and that's why this infrastructure plan, making sure that water, rebuilding our water infrastructure is a part of the infrastructure plan, because it's that important and crucial we get it right.
All right, Gretchen, we're going to switch gears here a little bit. If recreational marijuana is legalized, what, if any, additional regulations would you put in place?
If it does pass, I think it's going to be absolutely essential that we have a governor who is going to roll up her sleeves and get to work promulgating rules and making sure that we are prepared to do it right. Other states have adopted recreational marijuana, and there have been some glaring failures. There have been some good successes, and I think it's on us to make sure that we are promulgating, rules in the wisest way to make sure we actually collect the taxes and they go to, our education and infrastructure and healthcare the way that they're supposed to. But also that we ensure that recreational marijuana doesn't get in the hands of kids. I mean, that's what I worry about. I've got a 14-year-old and 16-year-old, and it's already too easy for young people to get their hands on marijuana. And so I want to make sure we do it right. I also think that it's going to be important that anyone who's got a record for something that would now be legal under the law doesn't pay a lifetime price for an old notion of what was permissible or not, and so that we move forward and to clean up those records. I think that that's a really important piece of it as well. You know, my mom, I took care of my mom at the end of her life. She died of a glioblastoma, which is the worst kind of brain cancer you can get. John McCain, I think, just passed from that. And during, you know, that 2 years I took care of her, I also was starting my own family, and so I was kind of sandwiched between a mom at the end of her life and a daughter at the beginning of hers. And, you know, that's what experience is what made me who I am. It's why I crossed the aisle and delivered on Medicaid expansion. But it's also why in 2008 I championed the stem cell initiative, and we amended our Constitution to permit this cutting edge research in Michigan, because I knew what it would mean for cures and for research and our ability to draw talent into Michigan. But I also endorsed the medical marijuana at the time. Both passed overwhelmingly, but we had people who didn't want to promulgate rules. And my opponent in this election was the Attorney General, and I think we've got a very, you know, it's become a mess because our leaders didn't carry out the will of the people. And I don't want to make that mistake. And so that's why, as I think about recreational, I know we've learned a lesson how not to do it just here from that last experience. And I want to make sure we do it right to keep people safe and to make sure we get those tax dollars.
Question I want to ask about this marijuana passing, because right now every company has a drug you screening, you pass or fail. So now you have recreational marijuana, even though legally it's illegal. As a company, what would the perspective be? Is like if we have a strict no drug tolerance.
There's no test to see if you are currently under the influence of marijuana. It's just a test to see if you've used it in the last 30 days. And so it's so imprecise, and that is a problem. I know that a lot of trades, when they bring people through the trade schools, that's the first thing, because there's always a drug test on the trades, because the work is so dangerous and so critical that it's done to a professional level, and that they cannot have any concerns that anyone is under the influence of anything. I think that there's a way to clarify that so that business can continue to have high standards without subjecting themselves to liability. But I think that that's something that we've got to make sure is very clear under the law, and that's a part of promulgating the rules. As I mentioned, if we move forward on this, we got to do it right, and business has to have a seat at the table.
As the CEO of the state of Michigan, you will have the power to reorganize government agencies and departments. Based on performance of individual departments, how would you organize them to make them more efficient?
When I look at state government, the combination of Department of Community Health and the Department of Human Services has created this one massive department that oversees critical things that we do here in Michigan. Kids who are in the foster care system, people who don't have health care and who are, confronting state government. I mean, this is the most vulnerable populations have been combined into one super department. And we're seeing that people are falling through the cracks, that caseloads are so big. When one caseworker has 800 people in the state to oversee, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. And so that's one department that I'm really looking very seriously at. The DNR and DEQ is potentially another that they used to be combined and they're not now. And when we think about the overarching goals of making sure that this is a great place for recreation and that we are healthy, maybe there's an opportunity there to do it a little bit smarter and a little more, current, right? A little more forward thinking.
Toxic chemicals called PFAS have been found in drinking water systems across the state and have become a topic of national interest. How do you plan to address PFAS contamination in Michigan?
We talked a little bit about infrastructure and my plans on infrastructure. We talked a little bit about the Department of Great Lakes and Freshwater and having a drinking water ombudsman at the cabinet level. We got to get the facts. I think that there are a lot of unknowns right now in Michigan. I don't have confidence that we even know where all the threats are. I've been grateful for the support of a group like the League of Conservation Voters. They estimate that it's going to be a lot, you know, what they've seen and what they've studied and what they've tested, a lot bigger than what we already know it to be, and it's already huge. So PFAS is a chemical that is a fire retardant that has leached into our drinking water, and it causes cancer. And you can't smell it, you can't see it, you can't taste it. And every time I turn on my tap, I've already been thinking about the people of Flint, many of whom who still can't drink the water coming out of their taps. But when the PFAS dynamic, we've got people in Parchment, Michigan, in Kalamazoo County, to Oscoda County, to Kent County. This is all around our state. And job one is getting a handle on the magnitude. Job two is starting the cleanup. And that may require legal action. That will definitely require investment, and that will, first and foremost, mean we need to map out where the magnitude and the severity of the problem is.
Activities such as the Flint water crisis, we're talking about years now, right? And the crisis is still going on. You got people that's not opening their tap for regular drinking or using or processing, and they have a very negative perspective, possibly, of the whole government officials, of how the water safety, and and many still won't drink the water, right? So the faith in government is extremely low right now, right? How do you fix that and prevent it from happening in the future as other potential environmental issues arises?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest problem to solve. We got a lot of tough problems to solve. Fixing our roads, making sure we get, lift up our educators and support education and make us a top 10 state again. Cleaning up our drinking water, but earning back the trust is one of the hardest things that we have to do. I was in church in Flint maybe a month and a half ago, and speaking with a woman who was talking to me about the water, and she pulled up her sleeve and showed me a rash up and down her arm. She'd just taken a shower that morning. Now, I don't know if it's the chemicals that they're using to treat the water to overcome the crisis that was created, or if it is still, I don't know, because I don't know enough about what is happening in her water in her house. But we've seen even this week reports that before the DEQ did tests, they were flushing the lines. Flushing the lines cleans them out. So when you take a test of what's really in that water, you've already kind of rigged the result. And so you understand why people don't trust state government. But I am determined to get in there and expedite replacement of pipes, to start providing bottled water service again until we can have confidence in it, and doing the hard work of showing up and working with people in the community to earn back the trust. And that's going to be the hardest of all the tough jobs ahead. That's going to be the hardest.
Well, I think we're ready to move into a much anticipated lightning round. So we're going to start with Amber, and we'll just go around the circle. Gretchen, if you could, they are all yes or no questions.
Okay.
I know you're a politician.
See if I can live by those rules.
I know you're a politician, so I'll give you 3 words. But
Gretchen, would you keep the work requirements recently put in place for Healthy Michigan recipients?
No.
Would you shut down the Enbridge lines, oil pipeline under the Straits of Mackinac?
3 words. Yes, I'll start the lawsuit on day 1.
that was like 6 or 7.
I know, but there's not a spigot in the governor's office, okay? So I can't make a promise I can't unilaterally deliver. So, yes.
Would you keep the Healthy Michigan Medicaid expansion?
Absolutely.
Are you willing to cap medical benefits on auto insurance?
It's going to be a part of the discussion, yes.
So would you expand the FOIA, F-O-I-A, to the governor's office?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did you write that one, Emily?
Well, that lightning round was just as quick as we could have hoped. And thank you so much for coming in today. Thank you to all of our panelists for asking Gretchen all these questions and helping all of us learn about her plans for Michigan. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.